Good morning. This week's been all about the bread of life in our lectionary, and I've got today John 6:52 to 59, where Jesus explains what the Eucharist is all about. Of course, you all know I'm well into food, and I've eaten some strange things in my time all around the world.
I've eaten crickets in Cambodia and worm omelettes on the west coast, snakes in Sarawak, and hamsters in Peru, a marmot in Mongolia, which has got into the news recently.
While those things might be a bit shocking and uncomfortable, I think very few of us would think it would be acceptable to eat human flesh. And so in our reading, the Jews are discussing and disputing among themselves, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? And of course, Jesus doesn't duck the question. He says, just as a living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so whoever eats me will live because of me. So whoever eats me will live because of me. But the key here is that he lives with the Father. And what I think Jesus is saying to us is that in the Eucharist, we not only eat bread and wine, drink wine, but we also partake in his relationship with God. We get a chunk of that amazing grace, that experience that Jesus had with God, that open relationship. And for me, that's a really special and incredibly important thing to think about. So during lockdown, I've really missed being able to take the Eucharist. And I know that everybody has their own view on that. I know that every denomination sees the Eucharist in different ways. But that relationship with God that we partake in is very hard to replicate, very hard to see in any other way than through the Eucharist. But during lockdown, we've had to explore that. During lockdown, we haven't had the option of Eucharist. And it's really got me thinking about other ways of being sacramental. A non-doctrinal definition of sacramental might be something like a finite reality through which the divine is perceived, something that we can create shape, form and structure from. And I think that's quite helpful in the absence of the Eucharist. How do we find some shape, form and structure to our relationship with God, with the divine? And I've been really inspired by a lot of the things that have happened through these talks, with looking at chocolate biscuits, with looking at hobbies, with the bag that is not perfect but is functional, of looking at journeys and actions and relating them, the everyday life we lead, to our experience with God. I'm a Franciscan, and I know that Francis considered the whole of creation an oblation to God. And so while I yearn to get back to Eucharistic worship and that mystery that it is, I hope and pray that we will take on from our experiences during lockdown those thoughts and processes and theological thinking that connects the ordinary, the daily, back to our relationship with God and lifts us to that place where we end up with an ongoing dialogue, an ongoing thought process, an ongoing spiritual connection that transforms and changes our lives on a day-to-day basis. Amen.